So Google Stadia is finally here, and boy oh boy, were there more than a few problems, to say the least. We are going to cover those and maybe ask a question: is there light at the end of this Google Stadia disaster? So if you've been on social media at all over the last few days, you probably know that Google Stadia's launch has been at the very least a PR disaster, and we're going to cover some of the issues as to why that is and to some of the potential long-term positives of Google Stadia. Yes, there is some light at the end of the tunnel, guys. So let's get right into this here. So I just want to start off with this. One of my favorite things I saw over the last few days about the poor play of Google Stadia came from this guy, Gene Park, who tested out his Stadia on Gigabit Ethernet internet at the Washington Post offices, I think. And you can see here, he's clicking the button to jump in what looks like a shooter game. Maybe it's Call of Duty, whatever got released on the console that we'll cover in a second. He hits jump, and the lag there looks like it's about a whole second. So I'm going to talk about why that is. So there is a giant lag when you're playing online games on Stadia in some cases. So here's why this is. When you are playing on a normal console, and by the way, I predicted this last year on the main channel, on my main business channel, that Google Stadia would have technical issues right off the bat. That is because when you're playing a normal game, as you all know, you're playing on your own console in your own home, and you're using that. If you're playing online, you're connecting to a server, the game server. Then that server communicates with the person you are playing with, and it's just kind of there's really three interactions. There's 2 to 3 interactions if you want to play the game. Now, if you want to play on this streaming gaming platform, what you are essentially doing is you are going from your controller, the Stadia controller, to the server, the Google server, and then it has to stream the game back to you so you know what to do. So it's coming back to you, and then you're putting in an input, and that is going back to the server, and the server is finally going to the end user, and then it's going both ways too. So we're doubling the amount of steps at the very least to play an online game, and it's also very heavy on the internet. So what you're doing here is it's a very big technical issue that Google might potentially be able to solve, which we'll get to at the end of this video here. But so far on its release, a lot of these online games have been a complete disaster in terms of how they're playing. Now, saying that, playing on your phone, from what I've heard, if you're playing single players, a lot of the time, that's been fine. The performance is a little bit less. Like Red Dead, I've seen Red Dead Redemption doesn't play anywhere near as well on Stadia as it does on consoles, on PlayStation. So I mean, there's been some positives there, but I mean, in terms of online games, this is not good at all. And here's another thing with Google Stadia, is that people started running how much data it uses to play games, especially if you're playing a heavy data game like Red Dead Redemption. We're talking 10 gigs an hour. I've seen some people on YouTube record this, and their games were up to about 15 to 18 gigabytes per hour of Stadia usage. How insane is that? 15 to 18 gigabytes per hour, meaning that if you have a normal internet package, let's say 500 gigabytes, okay, let's just round up. Let's just say you have a terabyte. Let's say you have a whole terabyte of data on your internet. If you were to have one gaming day where you just, on a weekend, on a Saturday, 100 gigs in one day, 10% of your internet is gone if you want to just binge games on Stadia. If that's just an average, and we're talking if it's like a Red Dead and we're getting near the 20 gigs, we're talking you can only play 5 hours and then 10% of your entire monthly internet usage is gone. So I think that they do have caps for this, from what I have heard. However, again, this is something that at this current second, at this current moment in time, with our internet capabilities, it's not good. It's not good. Now, there is light at the end of the tunnel for this specifically, but I'll get to that in a second. And so another bad thing with Google Stadia that has happened on launch is this. This is the games list. Do you notice anything in common with these games? So these games, apart from, I think, Guilt, which was supposed to be, it got like 70% on Metacritic. All of these games have been released already on all of the consoles within the last year or two. All of these games. I mean, think Elder Scrolls Online's been out for, 5 years? Assassin's Creed Odyssey came out last year. Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, I think that came out this year, actually. But again, Grid, Just Dance, Metro Exodus, Mortal Kombat, all of these games, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, they've all been played by their fan base already. There's no exclusives yet except for Guilt. So you have 0 big-time games on the launch of your gaming platform, and that is a big, big no-no. All right? I remember even PlayStation. And here's another thing, too. I don't even know if you got games on when you bought your Google Stadia. I don't even know if you were able to get some games for free. Like, I remember back in the old days when I bought my PlayStation 3, even though I have the next gen now, PS4, I think I bought that differently solo. But I think in PS3, if you bought it on launch day, I believe you got a game with the console, or a game, or even 3 games or something like that. And with Stadia, I don't believe you got that. Now, the price point is lower. It's $129 plus $10 a month. And that's pretty cheap, so you should be able to buy a game or 2 or 3 compared to the other consoles, even more than that. But still, the fact that you're not getting a game with the system, it's a little negative there. And so let's move on to some of the more neutral things here. So this has been the whole disaster so far. Actually, there's one more disaster. So here's Guilt, by the way. Got like 70% on Metacritic here. But one more thing is that to try and fix the latency issues, what they're trying to do here is to predict, or this article was from a month ago, so they might not do this, but they're trying to build some AI to predict your inputs, to predict your gaming style. And I think that this is another big no-no. Part of the best parts about gaming is the randomness of playing with other people. And so for me, when I play online shooters, I am one of those people that likes to try and break the game and do the opposite of what everyone else is doing that makes them successful. And by me doing something that's completely that they've never seen before, that a lot of the times is what makes it fun to play and makes me a successful game player in a lot of cases. So if you're trying to predict the user input, I think that that's a giant no-no for now. But here's the thing, is that I want to get to some of the neutral things here and some of the light at the end of the tunnel, and then my overall opinion on this Stadia issue here is that, okay, so here we go. First of all, some people were saying that you don't own the games, right? So when you buy Google Stadia, $129, and then you have to pay $10 a month, and then you have to stream the game for, $70, wherever you're from. It might be $60, it might be $80 if you're in Canada. So depending on the game, you don't own the game. You're buying the right to play it on the platform. And really, this isn't different than the other, even physical games that for like PlayStation 2. I mean, I get it, because the second you stop paying the subscription to Stadia, you cannot play it anymore. But at the end of the day, all these games are online now. I mean, think about it. With PlayStation, if you play even like a Call of Duty, you can't really play that anymore if you cancel your PlayStation Plus or your Xbox Live. So I don't see the online subscription and having you not own your games. I mean, the second you boot up your subscription again, you get to play the game again. That's how it works, and that's how it works with like Call of Duty, PlayStation Plus, and so that I'm kind of neutral on in terms of, yeah, sure, you can't play offline games, I'm guessing, anymore with Google Stadia. So if you don't have an internet connection and you don't pay your subscription, you cannot play your single-player Call of Duty campaign. I get that, but so I'm kind of neutral on that, though. People were complaining about that. For me, that's just kind of a neutral issue. Now, here's some of the light at the end of the tunnel that maybe a lot of the media out there is not talking about, because people are just jumping all over this console here. It is one of the worst big console launches I've ever seen, probably. I mean, I'm trying to think of a worse one. I mean, I've never heard of a console release with 0 exclusive games, at least from my memory, from what I've purchased. So anyways, let's get to some of the pros here. So a lot of the single-player games ran pretty well, actually. So I mentioned that already. A lot of single-player games, especially, like people were able to switch from like your TV to your phone pretty seamlessly, actually. So that was really cool. A lot of the single-player games ran relatively fine as long as you had an average to above average internet connection. So I mean, that was okay. As long as they weren't data-heavy games too. That was another thing. Let's see here. So here's one of the positive long-term things. I think there's this article here saying that they may try to predict your latency here for the game. I think that one of the best things that Stadia could do is add more data centers. Because right now, here's one of the things that people don't think about. So right now, Google is running their gaming servers, presumably on their Google Cloud platform, which I use. So Google Cloud has data centers all over the world. They have, 25 to 50 data centers. But here's an example. In Canada, I think that there's only 2 or 3. There's like one in Montreal or something, and then there's some out west somewhere. And so, for example, if someone wants to play in Toronto, you have to connect to the Montreal servers. And so you're sending data to Montreal, and then it's coming back, so you're able to play the game, and then you're sending it back to Montreal. Then the Montreal servers might be sending it to someone all the way out in New Brunswick or wherever, in PEI or Quebec City, wherever. And then they're sending it back to Montreal. And so the length that the data has to travel is actually limited by the speed of light and how fast data actually travels. And so that's actually contributing. I know that people think that this is stupid. That's partially contributing to why this is so slow. If you were to connect it to a data center right next to your house, presumably the game would run relatively fine. If you're playing online, if everyone was playing within 5 kilometers of your house, the game would probably run relatively fine. So that's why, for example, if you've ever gone onto someone's website and the website is from a data host and a company that is for me, I'm in Canada, they are in Australia, it'll typically take about 7 seconds to boot up that website, 7 to 13 seconds if they're hosting all of their data in Australia. But if you're going onto a website in Canada, it might take 10 milliseconds, 30 milliseconds. It might take a few seconds, a second or two if it's out in Vancouver. A lot of websites use servers from all over the world. So for example, my website Joysk had servers all around the world. So everyone that was going on the website had a load time of less than 2 seconds. And so one of the ways that you could actually solve this Stadia lag problem is just having more data centers, more servers so that people could connect more locally. That would in my opinion, that would help out a lot with this lag issue here. So that's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to get to this in a second here. I have a couple more things. So as internet costs go down, this might also be better too. So right now, as we know, if you have a 700 gigabyte internet data cap and you want to play Red Dead, that's going to be a pretty hefty bill on your internet usage. So I think that long term, as internet usage gets cheaper and your data caps go up, this could be a good long-term play. So this got me thinking actually about how Stadia, it might work out in the long term. All right, there are a lot of long-term positives here, but right now, it appears to me like people have never heard of this. People have never heard of General Magic. So I don't know, you probably have never heard of this company. But General Magic was a big company, relatively big startup company in the 90s. And in 1996, they came up with a device that could call people. You could, its contacts did your email. It was touchscreen. You could, I don't know if I said calendar. It was pretty much a modern day smartphone minus the social media apps and stuff. So I think that Google Stadia might just be a decade too early, just like General Magic's phone was. That came out in 1996. Smartphones didn't really pick up until really 2007 when the iPhone came out. But, I'll say BlackBerry did a good job in 2005. So a decade early. The technology was just a little too clunky in the 90s and no one caught on yet. And I think this Stadia might just be a decade too early right now. That's my opinion. This is an idea, actually, by the way, that I had for a subscription gaming console, where this console would be cheaper. I would say the games would be cheaper too, but again, I didn't think that I knew that the technical issues were still there. So this might be Amazon in 1990. This might be General Magic in 1995, Amazon 94. But it also might be a bust because we know that if things don't succeed with Google in the first 4 years, they typically shut things down. We will see how this works. Now, saying that, Stadia has set up their own Google Gaming Studio team. And so they're going to start to make original games. We will see how those go. They already, by the way, My game will likely be available on Google Stadia if they approve it. But again, they're trying to limit the games they want out on Stadia right now, which is the opposite of what I think should happen. But then again, you know what? Sorry, this is a bit of a long video here, but I was also thinking of this too. There were consoles that came out that had wide open third-party developer rules, and they had hundreds of games on launch, but they were all like tic-tac-toe and Flappy Bird and all that kind of stuff. I forget what the console was called, but it flopped pretty quickly. And so, again, it's this trade-off of how many third-party developers do you allow, and do you allow all of them, or do you allow none of them? And it's always somewhere in between. You can't allow none, and you can't allow all of them and succeed, and you can't allow none of them and succeed on launch. We will see how that works out. So for now, I think that is going to wrap this video up. So I have two quick things here. So this is the first podcast form video on this channel/podcast network that I'm just launching right now. So I thank you very much for listening to this if you listen to this in audio form. The second is actually I'm going to be coming out with a tutorial on how to make video games, like I'm making Attika right now. I'll be coming out with a course on how to actually make your own game. Very similar to how I make my games. And I'll teach you some of the basic systems that you can do, some of the basic animations you can do, and so on and so forth. So stay tuned for that. And so that's exciting. And the last thing is, check out Attika. So I'm getting pretty close here to having enough to do a Kickstarter. I am making the final, I'm doing the touch-ups on I'm on the Kickstarter launch. I want one Titan and one God. I'm not spoiling anything here. And one God. And so I'm currently making the God right now. And so once I have those two and the cutscenes done and have those all looking nice and pretty along with the village and the city of Athens, I will be ready to do a Kickstarter. So stay tuned for that. For now, I would like to thank you very much for watching or listening to this. And I will see you guys in the next video.